Hello again and welcome to part 4 of building an electronics inventory system. Sorry if there's some background noise you can hear going on. I'm not going to say due to the current times, but you know what I mean. People are working from home, so you know, let's just get through. You may have noticed I've changed my wallpaper. I love space. I could just stare at it for ages, couldn't you? Anyway, let's open PyCharm and continue. Okay, so we're in PyCharm and I'm going to take you through some of the changes I've made since the last video. So I've changed the dates to return actual dates in the header rather than the datetime.datetime. Blah blah blah. So get component data now goes through each component it finds, and if it's an entry date or an updated date, it will format it as a date that is set in the config file. So in config.ini we have date format %d. Ignore %, you need that because otherwise it tries to pass it, but whatever. %d is the date. %b is the month, but in month form and the short. So January would be Jan. If I do %B, it would say January, the full word. And then %y is the year, so 2021. And this will be able to be updated from the user settings when we get to that part. So I've done that. I've also added labels and surrounded them in a form group here in the form in the index page. So we've got div class form group label for whatever that is. I've added one for datasheet. So if it's datasheet, it puts text with the information in, and it also adds 2 links, one to upload and one to delete. They don't do anything at the moment, but they will eventually. And then I've added description and comment because there will be text areas, not text box inputs. I'll show you what it looks like at the moment, but I'll go over the rest of the changes before I do that. I have fixed the modal close button. Because I'm using Bootstrap 5, they have changed some things. So button class is button secondary, blah blah blah. That makes the close cross look as it should. I've made the modal a little bit bigger with some Bootstrap class, which is basically just modal-lg for large. That is so that we have enough room to put the form in and make it look pretty decent, instead of all squished up in the middle. I've also added another navigation item here for add component for that form we made a couple of episodes back, whenever that was, which will eventually look really nice and pop up in a modal rather than a separate page. I think a modal would be a better option for that. Let's have a look and see what it looks like. So we start it and click here. We have a striped table which I've added. That was just some simple Bootstrap class of table striped or whatever it was. I can't remember, but you can look at the Bootstrap for their documentation. So we've got the name, description, location and all those listed. They're all centered and the dates look like this. And the comments are here. You can edit them, and as you see, the modal in us says edit component. The cross up here looks fine and it's a lot larger. And upload and delete is here. They don't yet do anything, but they will do. And the reason delete is red, that's also a Bootstrap class. I think it's like danger or warning or something. No, warning's orange. I think it's the danger text class. So the button works as it should, and each modal works as it should. I've done a little bit, it's a bit hacky, some of the stuff I've done, but what's coding without something that's a bit hacky? But down here I've got the component data from how we did last time, but it's split at the commas, so they're all comma separated. And then the first one, it removes the object ID text. And then for the rest of them, it does a slice which gets rid of the first two characters. One was a space and one was a quotation mark, and the last character, which was a quotation mark. Apart from on the last one, the comment, the last character, there was a quotation mark and a square bracket. So that gets rid of that, which results in the nice looking page of data we see here, which gets passed to this. So there's no weird ends of things like this anywhere surrounded by quotation marks. That's all gone. It may not be the best way of doing it, as I've said before, but it's the way I'm going to do it. When this is released, if you want to change that and update it and whatever, do your own thing, then that's fine. Go ahead. But for my purposes, it works fine. No worries. Database ID, as well as entry date and last updated, have no ability to edit, so they are disabled and read only, because you wouldn't want to edit those because you'd mess up the database, and there's no point editing. I mean, you could edit these without messing it up, but there's no point really. I mean, it was made when it was made, and it was updated when it was updated. I think it makes sense to begin with making this look good, and then because it's exactly the same information that will go into add component, we can make this look nice and then copy it into this, and then that will give us a good base to start this with, and this will be in a modal much the same as this is, so that altogether it's a bit more uniform and we don't need an extra page up there. We can just have it all on one like this is. So to add some lovely looking style to our modal, we need to use the form here and lay it out with columns and things like that, the same as the rest of the content is, where we've got rows and all that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, I've added this. I forgot to mention it earlier specifically, but these are the classes for the table that I've added. Table striped, text center and align middle, so it's all in the middle. All the cells are center aligned. And then I've added the table head and the table body tags as necessary, just to make it a bit more as it's supposed to be. So let's get to adding some classes to these and see how it goes, if we can't make it look a lot better. Before I decide to make it look good, I've decided to create a folder called snippets in templates and put each little individual piece in there and build the index from that, so that this doesn't get filled with loads of content and it's much easier to maintain. So I've had snippets and then component table.html, and in there is all the information that will create the table, and it's just included in the same way that the header and the footer are included in the index file. And then this will be much tidier. So here I will have include component modal, and I'll put that in snippets, and then down here we can have the JavaScript. So here is our edited index.html. We include the header, then we start the main content, which includes component table, which then includes edit component modal, and then the JavaScript, which I've moved to the JS folder and called index.js. It's exactly the same, just moved it there. Edit component modal isn't finished yet, but it's in there, and the component table is just in component table.html. So this tidies up index.html so we can work on the individual pieces rather than the whole file and scrolling through the whole thing. And as you can see, once we run it, it looks exactly the same and everything functions just as it did before. Ignore this, I'm in the middle of setting the rows and making the edit component modal look good. And then when that's done, we'll copy it to add component and make that a modal, and then we'll continue from there. Okay, so I've just deleted the description field for our component because I don't think we need it, as we have a comment which can be used as pretty much the same thing. I've also completely changed the edit component modal and hard coded all of the fields from the database instead of going through them. It's not completely finished just yet. As we see, there's no more description because you can just use the comment if you need to write something about it. Description is irrelevant. If you know what you're looking for by name, then the comment will help you if you need some extra information about that particular item. After removing the description, I didn't need to change anything in the add file, just to temporarily add it, because it would remove description as an option. But back on the table, here we can see I've put in two components, LED and a 555 timer, and we don't need description, we could just put something in there. And then when we go to edit, here we have the name, the footprint and the location, the amount, the datasheet. Ignore this at the moment. The reason it's putting the wrong information in because the edit page is still looking for the description, so some stuff has shifted over. But database ID, entry date and last updated are at the bottom, and they are disabled and read only. This is the stage I'm at the moment. I'll show you it all and talk you through it as it is and as it will be once I've finished. So we have the modal in edit component modal.html. It's still a form as before. Most of this is the same apart from now there's rows and columns. So in the row there's a column which takes up four column width. With Bootstrap there's 12 in total, I think. So 4, 4, 4 is 12, which means I can have 3 columns that look evenly spaced, as you see here, inside the modal. So I've hard coded all of these in. I'm going to add, or edit rather, the comment one so it doesn't look so strange. And then we've got ID, entry date and last updated at the bottom, and they're read only and disabled, as I've said quite a few times now. But that's where it's at the moment. Add component will eventually be a modal that will look very similar to this, but I want to do this one first and then I can make add component look the same, but just remove the ones we don't need. So to fix these being in the incorrect place, and this one and this one, all I need to do is go into my JavaScript and move these by 1. So wherever it starts going wrong, so here we've got description was 2, but now it isn't. Now it would be location. So we can delete this line and we can change this to continue going up. Oh, what have I done here? There we go. 3, 4, and so on. And then we can run it again, and it should have fixed that issue. Yes, there we go. I just had to refresh. I've added padding around the form control class, or into the form control class, as well as to the datasheet button div, which is here. So on the edit datasheet links, that's where the buttons are. The height is 100% so that the buttons are in the middle, in line with this. Otherwise they'd be up here at the start of the div. And I have also added padding of 10% into both that and the form group, which is these. So each one of these that contains the label and the input has a 10 pixel padding around it, which gives it this nice bit of space between everything else. And the same padding is added to this here, so that it all matches up and looks better. So the next thing to do, I'm going to do something a bit more fun. I'm going to be adding some icons from Bootstrap to make it look a bit nicer. And those icons come from Bootstrap itself. Before, I used to use things like Font Awesome and some various other different icon providers, but Bootstrap have their own ones. So as we're using Bootstrap anyway, I think it makes sense to just use those within our project. I will also be adding a component modal, so at the moment it still goes to this page we made however long ago that was. It'll be pretty much the same as the edit one, but just won't include the bottom ones because they are generated by the MongoDB database as the thing gets added. After this, I'll be adding a way to handle add and edit errors and success. So once you've edited it and you press save, this will disappear and it will pop up a little note that will say save successful or save error and give you a reason why. And the same thing for once you've added a component from the modal. It will tell you if it's worked or not. And then we can move on to something else, such as the system settings page, which we'll do a lot later on, probably in another episode after we've done with the modals here. And then I'll sort out the footer content, table sorting, so you click this and it will sort by alphabetical or numerical, depending which one you click on, of course. And then some overall polishing at the very end. So that's the plan so far of the project. On the system settings page, we'll have an option to set how you want the date to be displayed in entry and update, and also a theme, so we'll maybe have a dark theme or a different color theme or whatever. We'll get to that when we get to it, but for now we're going to add some icons from Bootstrap. So instead of cut to an already included Bootstrap icon thing, I will do it on the video, as I've noticed I've been cut into things that I've already done, which isn't very helpful for anyone trying to follow along, although when the project's on GitHub you'll be able to download it and look through the code anyway. But for now, let's get to adding some icons. So here they all are in their glory on the Bootstrap website, getbootstrap.com. Although this is icons, not getbootstrap.com, but whatever. We will include them by downloading the latest zip from GitHub. I could use a CDN as before, but I want this to be able to be used offline if possible. So we'll go on GitHub and we'll download the latest zip from here. Here's all our icons. Now it might get a bit annoying to have all of them, but that's just how it's going to be. So I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it icons. Then all of these icons I will, wrong button. I will copy all of these, the whole lot into here. There they all are in all their glory. It's only 1.6 megabytes, so it's not too bad. And then we have the fonts here. Who knows, I might want some earbuds in there at one point in the future. Or a fried egg. Who doesn't want a fried egg in their project? Now that we've downloaded it all and copied it over, let's get to actually using it. So as I've done with the previous ones, I will take the CSS file from the CDN and copy and paste it, and then change what's necessary and include it in the project. So up in our header file, which is in Inc header, we can include the CSS. I'll put it above the style, so link style sheet. There we go. Type equals text /CSS. href is going to be /static /CSS /bootstrap.icons.min.css. I presume we're going to call it that. What's it actually called? We'll call it what it's called. Bootstrap-icons.css. Okay. So it's not min. We'll call it bootstrap-icons.css. Save that. That doesn't actually exist yet. So we'll go new, file, bootstrap-icons.css. And then in there I will paste the CSS for the icons. Now we need to change these. So after changing it to /static/icons blah 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 to the where the font is included, egg-fried. There we go. We can use this. So bootstrap icons -egg-fried. We can reload it, open it up, and see that we now have a fried egg in the footer, which we don't actually want to keep there, but it's just a test so that we know it works. So we can add some icons now to our buttons. I'll start with the edit buttons. I'll add a little pencil in there. I'll also remove the fried egg from the footer because we don't want a fried egg at our feet. So here we can take that away. We haven't done the footer yet anyway, but it doesn't matter. We'll take the fried egg away. If we put it somewhere else that was already done, we'd probably forget about it and end up, well, I would probably forget about it and end up with a random fried egg somewhere on the page, which we don't really want. Anyway, let's go to the Bootstrap website and have a look at some of the icons. Try and find one suitable for the buttons. So we go back up here to buttons. We can search around these. So we've got an X here, which I could use for the cancel icon. But first of all, let's search for edit. We got credit card. Okay. Maybe pencil. Ah, yes, there we go. Pencil fill, or pen, or this pencil. I don't really know which one yet, but we've got pencil and pencil fill as an option. So we'll copy the icon font line there and paste it into our edit button, which is here. I'll reload it. We'll see what that looks like. Oh, I realise what I've done. I've not pasted it into the button. I've pasted it up here, but still, it looks pretty good. I might leave that there, actually. Let's put it in the button itself, which is not in this file. It's in the component table, isn't it? So we'll put it there. Let's see what that looks like. And there we go. We have a little pencil to edit. We click it, we have a pencil up here, edit component. I might make the pencil solid and have this one as the filled one. It doesn't really matter. It's however you want it. So I think it was, we have our edit button and our edit component header with an outline pencil. Let's add one to cancel and save changes. We can see if we can add a cross, which was at the bottom. I think it was just an X, but there may be a better option. Could have an X circle, or an octagon, or a square, or just an X. Perhaps X circle will be a good option. So we'll copy this, put this here, and whilst I'm at it, I'll find one for save. It's got to be a floppy disk, hasn't it? Do they have an option for save? Oh yes, they have this. This is nice. But do they have a floppy? Okay, we'll use the save option from here. Copy this and put it there. Reload it. Refresh. Cancel and save changes. Yeah, I think that looks quite nice. And then we have upload and delete left. Let's see if we can find one for those. Upload is a cloud image. Of course it is, because everything's a cloud these days. It's not really uploading to a cloud though, is it? Is there another upload option? Yes, this one better. It matches the save kind of style, or the style of the save icon rather. And delete, is there a dustbin? For delete we can use this trash icon. We'll see how this looks. There we are. Looks much better. A bit more polished. I need to put a margin or some padding between these, I think. So to do this, I can add in the class of the div that contains the buttons, justify content evenly. It's already flex, and I've already got this align items end, which puts them at the bottom and lines them up with the bottom of the text box here, or the whole text box even. But what we want to do is also space them out horizontally. So justify content evenly should do that. So if we reload, load it up here, refresh, and there we go, there's a gap between and now it's a bit better. Now this all works, we can move on to that add component modal, which will be pretty much the same as this one, just not including these three. So what I'll do is copy the one we currently have. So all of this, because this is all the modal, so copy this into a new snippet that I will call add component modal.html. And then I'll paste it into here. And change the ID to component add modal. Everywhere it says component edit, it will say component add. So an easier way to do this would be for me to go to edit, find replace, or press Ctrl R, change it to component add. Place all. There was only two in there, but you know, whatever. We can change this to add component. We can change the pencil to be a plus sign or a component. I did see a cool component icon that I think I might use instead of the pencil, but we'll do that in a moment. So add component, this won't say update, this will say add. Method is post. These are mainly the same as the edit one, so we'll have the name, location, the footprint, the amount, the data sheet, comments. But these ones, row 4 will not be here. So we'll delete row 4. And then we'll change save changes to save and add. And then we will save this, go into our index page where we've included edit component. We will also include add component modal. Now if we check it out, it won't work at the moment because this still goes to this page. So what we need to do is make this link similar to how this link functions. But if we look in the actual source code and scroll down, here we have our component add modal. So it is included. So we'll make the add component link behave in a similar fashion to the button to pop up with the new add component modal. To add the link, we need to look at how the link is called, how we manage to open it from the edit button. And to do that, we need to look in the component table at the button itself and see how it works. So it toggles a modal, and the target of the modal is component edit modal. So what we can do, we can copy this bit, so the toggle and the target. I'll delete component, we don't need that, and I'll add it in to our header on the add component. I'll make it a hash, which means basically go to an anchor on the page, but if there isn't any text after this, then there's no anchor to go to, it doesn't go anywhere. And I'll paste this in. and remove this data component and change this to component add modal. So then I'll save it and we can test to see if it works. And there we go, add component. Edit component, add component. I'm going to change this icon to a little component icon. The rest I'll leave the same. But before I do that, we need to stop this happening. Now the reason these get filled is, for example, if I edit the LED, the JavaScript will search for component LED field or whatever it was called and fill in these. Because we copied this, the add component one is called exactly the same thing, so they're getting filled in. I need to change the IDs to something else. So I'll say new component name. Like so. Save and reload. It's still filled in from the previous one, but after a refresh again, there's nothing in here. And if we go to edit the LED, it's filled in as it should be. But when we go to add, nothing is filled in. Oh, I missed the comments, but I'll do that one. And then nothing will be filled in. Down here we've got component comment, new component comment, reload it, go back into here, give it a good old refresh. Add component has nothing. Edit LED, it's filled with information. Add component, nothing. So at the moment, save and add does nothing. Neither does upload or delete. They will do the same thing as the edit, upload and delete. So that will be a separate function on its own. But save and add will obviously be a function on its own, but it will just add a component. It won't do anything else, or it's not used anywhere else. This one, the edit component and the add component, are different functions. So what I'll do first is change this little icon, and then I will create the update component function that will actually update the component in a database. And then once that's done, I will create the function that will add the component. And then we should have a pretty much fully working system here, apart from the upload and delete data sheet. But we'll get to that bit. I'll do that after I have a basic working system. So let's make this a different icon. Okay, back on the Bootstrap icons website, we can search for one to add a component. I did see one I liked earlier. CPU, there it is, straight away. So we can copy this, go into here. Oh, I've just also realized that here this also needs to be new, because for links to the ID, not name. I'll change name to be new component whatever, and then we'll continue with the icon. Okay, now we can continue with changing the icon. The icon is here, and it's currently a pencil. I'm going to paste the one we copied to the CPU icon, reload, and then when we click here, we've got a little CPU icon. Just to make it a bit different from the edit screen. So now let's move on to the update function. So if I change the footprint of this to say tsop or whatever, when I press save changes, it will actually save and update the information in the database and reflect it on the site. To begin with, we need to set the button to be a submit button. So instead of type button, type will be submit. So it should now work, but it won't give us any feedback. So if we try to add a new component, so we can add a save and add. Oh, I see what we've done. We've gone to the page instead of the function. So the function in here is add to DB. Remember, I changed it. So this page we don't actually need anymore. And we will return index. Although keeping in line with /remove /update, maybe it should just be /add. So we'll change it back to /add. Save it. Part of this is looking at what you've already done and figuring out why it now currently isn't relevant or doesn't work. And as you may have noticed, I do things in a very strange order. Maybe it's strange to you, but to me, I see something, I get distracted, I start working on that bit, and then I go back to another bit, and I'm kind of all over the place. But I eventually get it all in the right places, doing the right thing. Whilst I'm on the subject of going backwards and forwards and trying to tidy things up, let's just change these method names, function names, to be a bit more simple, to match the root. So update will be update, remove, add, error index. Reload it, and now let's see if we can add a new component. So I think we're getting this bad request because it's not called, the data it's giving it isn't name, location, footprint. It's new component and then whatever, new component, location. I think we can just change it to just be as simple as name, location, footprint, and so on. So me going around earlier, changing all the names to new component and whatever, was a bit pointless. But you know, you live and learn. That's the point in this. It's all fun. It's like a challenge. So we changed all these before, and now I'm changing them back to lowercase. Now let's try it again. I'll load up a new one. Edit works as usual. I don't know why it wouldn't. I haven't changed it. Add component. So we can add USB socket. Can be in drawer 6. Footprint. PCB mount. I don't know the actual footprint name of a USB socket, but whatever. Amount, we've got 3. Data sheet is google.com, and comments yarp. Save and add, and there we go. Now it works. We can edit. It gives us all the relevant information, and it's in the database. So now that works, we can make it actually update the information when we press save changes. If we've changed something here and press save, it will update. And then after that, I'll handle the adding and editing errors and success, so it can inform you whether it's worked or if something went wrong. So we have this from earlier, our /update method, which worked before. Is it going to work again? Who knows? We need to make sure we send the ID in this post. Okay, so in the edit component modal, we've got /update component, although it's just /update. And then the button at the bottom, the Save Changes button, we need to change from type button to submit. Now, when we save it and reload, it should work just as the Add Component button does by updating the content. So we'll change this comment on the LED from hello to goodbye. We have exactly the same problem as last time with the naming of the fields. So I've changed all these to just what they are in lowercase, so that when it sends data, it will come into here as it should. Updated date will change to whatever the current date is when you press save and it runs this. Entry date obviously stays the same. So let's reload it and give it another go. So it turns out with my whole read-only and disabled option, it was causing the data to not be sent to the update function, which is why we was getting this bad request error. I added a print statement so it printed the information, and with only read-only it would print, but with disabled it just completely is not there. As you see, entry date is not in this list because before I removed it, it also had disabled, so it looked like this when I ran it. So this was the result. So removing disabled and leaving just read-only fixes that issue. We also don't need to update entry date because entry date will always be what it was. So we only update the name, location, footprint, amount, datasheet, updated date, which will be a date, datetime not now, and the comment. So let's see if we can update the LED as we tried to earlier. So let's run it. LED, we can edit it, and we'll do this for the third time lucky, hopefully. Location will be 4, footprint, let's turn to 7 pins. We've only got 3 left. Datasheet is on yahoo.com. Comment, please work this time. And then these we can't change. And there we go. It's updated. And the reflection is here. Everything works as it should. I could also add in so that you can only put an integer in amount. There's not really any point. If you want to say there's 42 like that, or you want to write it like that, then why not? It's only for your own thing. It's not for a client or anything like that. And if you want to change that, if you want to download it when it's available on the GitHub and change it, you're more than welcome to put in some validation to make sure amount is an integer or a name, or location only has certain things it can have in its characters or whatever. So let's add some success and error handling and then do the upload and delete for the data sheet, because that's a bit more involved, requires files and or URLs. So as we're already dealing with the update function, let's continue with this one and add in some tests. So we'll say Terry, we'll say try, and then we'll have this. And then if this works, we'll return true. And that needs to be capital T. Except exception as E, return E. and then we can remove return index. So what will happen is, when update is run, it will try to add something to the database, and then say it will literally return true. If it doesn't work, it will create an error as E and return whatever the error was. And we'll be able to read that in our front page or in our JavaScript and print it to the user with an alert saying added or error. And we'll do exactly the same in our add method up here, function. So we'll say try. We'll wrap the whole thing in the try this time. Return true. Accept exception as E. Return E. And then we don't need to return to the index. So that's some very basic way of doing it. We could catch each exception. So if it's a connection error, do this. If it's that, do that. But it doesn't matter, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we need to know. And we'll know why from this E. And we'll be able to tell the user exactly what went wrong. And there we go. But first, there's something I completely forgot, and that's this. Remove a component. Whilst we're doing it, we will add this don't need this X anymore. Accept exception as E, return E. Now that's there, we need to add it into our edit component. We need a button to completely remove the component. Now to make that, I'm going to add a button in here, perhaps over this side, that says delete component. So let's do that before we continue and get ahead of ourselves. This is the thing, I always go backwards and forwards, like I said earlier, but I always end up going back to doing the correct thing. So here we can copy the cancel button as an example, put it above here. It'll be next to this at the moment, but it doesn't matter. We'll change this to trash again, and we'll say delete component. The class is button dash danger, and it's subtype button. These aren't the correct. There we go. So there should be a trash button or a rubbish bin next to it. At the moment it doesn't do anything. It does the same as cancel, which just closes the modal, but it will remove the component. And I'm going to move it over to this side so you can't accidentally click it, because all the other buttons are over on the right. So let's move this over and then make it work, and then we'll work on some feedback for the user. So component successfully deleted, component delete error, component updated, component update error, and component added, component add error. All in a little, some sort of pop-up or text that will come up and then disappear, or require user intervention if it's an error to acknowledge that you've read it. Rather than, here's an error, you can only see it for 3 seconds, now it's gone. So all I've done to move the delete component button to the left and keep the other two to the right is in the footer. I've added the class of me-auto, which is a Bootstrap 5 class that will keep it over on the left. So now the button is there. Let's link it to the remove function. So here it's set to dismiss the modal because it was a cancel button before. We need to give it an ID and then target it in the JavaScript. So we'll say ID equals component remove button. Just before we do that, I'd like to point out that I've changed the return true in all of these functions. So add, remove and update to return result and set each query as a variable called result. As the JavaScript is expecting a string response, whereas true was a boolean. So this is just an easier way of doing that. Anyway, onto the JavaScript part. Here we have this from before. I'm going to add a new one below. That will be the click listener. There we go. We need the post ID. And we get this from the ID, the value of the input box. Similar to how we have up here. Pretty much the same as we have up here, actually. Except we don't replace the value. So I might as well just copy and paste this one. And remove this part. And then we need to post it to the correct place. So jQuery has a .post, which is very handy, of /remove. And then you can set your own things to put in there. So post ID is always sending. And then we're going to have it return some data so we know if it's worked or not. And for now we'll just log it. So let's test it out. Close these old ones. We'll add a component. We'll just call it test. We don't need to fill in the rest of this. Although when we save an add, we'll get an error because this has no way of returning whether it's worked or not. But it doesn't matter because it's still here. So we can edit. Let's open the console, Ctrl-Shift-K, and then press delete component. And we get this object. N is 1, OK is 1. Now OK is always 1 if this returns, as far as I'm aware from the tests I've done. N is, I think, the number of affected lines in the database. So there's only one entry with this ID, and there will always only be one with that ID, so it will only return 1. So we can check that if it returns 1, it was successful. So back in PyCharm we can see if we can log just N. Which should give us a 1 when we remove something. Let's add test again. Here we are. And there we go, 1 successfully removed. Now we can use that one to display a message to the user saying deleted successfully or whatever. So this works. This if else. So in here we can pop up an alert using Bootstrap, otherwise pop up an alert that's more of an error. In keeping with our snippet system, I'll create a new file called alerts.html and we'll put them in here. So here I've copied these from the Bootstrap documentation for the modal. We've got an error one up here. The error modal body here will be filled in by the JavaScript, and the user will have to click close to close it. The success one has no button to close, it will automatically close after a few seconds, and the same, this will be filled in by the JavaScript. So let's start testing these out and making them work by adding the relevant code into here. So as usual, I've skipped forward a little bit, but I've added this, which gets the ID success modal and shows it. There's no way of closing it at the moment apart from pressing escape, but we'll get to that in a moment. And I'm going to rename alerts to result modals, and then I need to include it just as I've done with the other ones inside index.html. I'll include it down here. And we also don't want it to appear in front of the modal we already have. So we'd like to close it first. So let's add a test, I'll show you what I mean. It would appear in front of this one. See? You want to close this edit component one, or add component or whatever, and then have this appear and disappear. So we'll do that first. We'll have it close our original one, then show, then hide. And I think it was called component edit modal. Yes, here. So we can put that in there, and then current modal dot hide. This should work. Let's test it out. Close all these other things. Right, we'll add a random. There we go. Okay, it didn't hide. Okay, so the reason that didn't work is because I'm trying to get or create a new modal from an element which is already kind of existing and it doesn't really know what to do. Something like that, I'm not sure, because it's created when we click the button rather than here in the code. So I need to create a reference to it. So current modal element would be document.get element by ID component edit modal, and then we need to set it as current modal equals bootstrap.modal.get instance, and then current modal element, instead of the way we were doing it. So let's save this, give it a go. So add a random component, delete, and there we go. So we want this modal to disappear automatically and not have the user have to press a close button or press escape or something. To do this is very simple. We can use a timeout. So we can say set timeout function, and then we can just do modal.hide, and then when do we want this to happen? say after 2 seconds. And it's as simple as that. That should run this after this, but after 2 seconds after this. So let's reload it and give it a go. So I'll add a random component. There it is. We'll edit it. Success. Closes itself. And now there'll be an error because this hasn't disappeared. We'll get to that in a minute. But this is a good way to check that the error is working. The error modal. Which it does. This one we have to manually close. And we'll also make this disappear. So down here we need to make it pretty similar to this one. So I'll do that. And then we'll continue. I've moved these up here because they're used in both of these. So it makes sense to not get it twice for no reason. Now let's test out the error. To do this we need to first add another component. We need to delete it successfully. And then, as it isn't removed from here, we need to try and delete it again. There we go. An error has occurred. We can click the close, the cross, or over here, or press escape. And there we go. Now let's make these, not these, these modals look a bit nicer. Okay, after some tidying up, I have this. I've moved these all to up here, so they're only set once. And the remove says if data n, so if data n is 1, true, it will show success. Else if it's not, it will show a database entry with that ID cannot be found. And if neither of these are true, it will show a generic and log a generic data return for whatever the error may be. So let's test it out. I'll show you how it works. So we need to add one still. We have this here, we can edit it, delete, we get success. I'm going to tidy that up a little bit more. If we try again, which we won't be able to in a moment, but if somehow that happened, an error occurred. Database entry with that ID cannot be found. And you have to click close or click away or press escape. So you have to acknowledge that you've read that there's an error, so you're not left wondering why it's not working. I think to make it even more tidy, I will rename result modals to just modals. And then I will also put these ones inside it. Add component. We'll also delete add component modal.html. And now we've got modals and component tables. And in our index we can delete all this and just change it to modals. Tidies it up a little bit, keeps everything that's similar in a similar place. Oh, in case you were wondering, when I was pressing the button here, I have a key mapped on my keyboard that is supposed to do this less than, exclamation mark, dash dash, and then space, space. So it's supposed to type this. And then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. And then lets me put in whatever comment I want. But for some reason on Linux, it doesn't seem to work very well. It just kind of... yeah, I don't know. But that's what was going on there, in case you were wondering. So I'm also going to be changing the HTML inside the success modal, as we've done with the error one. Here, where we've got modal error message, and we set it to whatever the message is. I can delete this for now. But I can copy this into the success modal. and then we can say modal success message. Save it. Then in here we can copy this, put it here. We can say success modal body, modal success message, and then we can set it to whatever we want. So in the case of this, it will be component removed successfully, or something like that. Let's test it out and make sure it works. The reason I'm doing this is because we'll also be using it for this add component. So when we save an add, we'll get the modal come up and it will say component added successfully instead of internal server error. And the same here, component updated successfully. There we go. And then we have the error. Maybe success component removed successfully is a bit too many success in succession. Maybe it can just say component has been removed. Now let's move on to using the modals for adding a component and updating a component. Just before I added the add component form handler, which I did start here, I decided to turn the display modal stuff into a function. So it's a little bit easier to put the stuff in. So I've removed some of the bits I did earlier. Well, not removed it, but moved it down here. So we've got function display modal, which takes a string of the current modal, boolean of is it an error, boolean of does it have a timeout, integer of the timeout, and the message to be displayed in the modal. And then here it gets the relevant elements, hides the current one. If it's an error, shows it, shows the message. If it's a timeout, it will add that to the error. Else, if it's a success, it will show it and the message, and the same with the timeout. And it works just fine, and it's a little bit easier to maintain. So here we can remove this one, for example, and there we are. Component has been removed. We try and remove it again. We get the error. Same as before, it just looks a little bit neater. And I can collapse that away, continue adding the form handler. So here is our form handler. Add component form.submit. It takes in an event. The event is prevented from happening. This event is basically when you submit a form, it refreshes the page and sends the data. We don't want none of that. We want it to be handled by just this. So it gets the form data and serializes it. This we don't need anymore. Then uses Ajax to send it to /add as a post. If it receives true, it will display a modal saying component has been added. Otherwise, it will display whatever it receives as an error. Now the reason this true is a string is because in here we have to return this as a string, otherwise it throws an error. But I'll show you this working. We'll add a component. You'll see I've added a few to test already. So I'll add one called diode, because why not? We'll leave the rest, it doesn't matter. Save and add. Component has been added. It disappears. It's not here until you refresh, but that's what I'm going to figure out now. And as you can see, it's all here. We can delete it. Has been removed. And again, we'll have it so that when the modal disappears, it will reload this. Or before the previous modal is hidden, this will be reloaded in the background, so it will be ready and updated. So I found this on Stack Overflow. It basically takes the component table ID and loads into it the same thing that's already into it. So it basically reloads only this. So here we have the table. We can test it with an add component. put in a name, Larry, save and add, and there you can see Larry has appeared already. And the same with if we were to remove a component, disappears as you remove it. And the success, even though it's on a timer, a success modal, you can click it and it will just disappear quicker. So that's where we're at right now. I think the next thing to do is possibly deal with datasheet uploading and deleting. I've also realized here looks fine, but in here this is pushed up. But I'll figure that out at a later date. So I think that's it for this video. This one's very long, I do apologise. I thought the others were long, but this one's a lot longer. Next time we'll deal with fixing this and making it actually work, as well as perhaps sorting the table and some system settings, some tweaks here and there. If you like what you've seen, please give it a like. If you don't, please tell me why. If you have any comments or suggestions, put them in the comments. And please consider subscribing and pressing the bell. It really means a lot. So, thanks very much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.